Hi, everybody. Thanks for being back here again. Once a week, we go through one big economic issue, one big security issue, and one big issue related to democracy and what's going on every week. First, I want to talk about an economic issue, the loss of manufacturing jobs. Jobs report just came out. It showed 12,000 jobs lost just in August. 42,000 jobs lost since April. Anyone who's from a place like Michigan understands what it means when we are shedding manufacturing jobs. It is a sign that the economy is slowing. For the first time since 2021, we have more people unemployed across the country than job openings. It's been since COVID, since we've had that. In the meantime, we've had companies closing their doors because of tariffs, right? Much of this is connected to tariffs. Howard Miller in Zeeland in March closed. Detroit Axle is closing a warehouse in Ferndale. So we're starting to see real effects on the ground, no matter what President Trump has been saying. On that score, you probably heard that the president didn't like the numbers that were coming out of the Labor Department. And so he fired the person who's in charge of the Labor Department statistics on job loss. This is the equivalent of someone watching a baseball game, seeing their team losing and just changing the scoreboard to try and make you think that their team is winning. That's what's been going on. It is a very dangerous thing because we all know what happens in the economy is extremely important to every single person, every single Michigander, everyone in the country. The president can try and erase these numbers, but people in Michigan in particular understand what is happening in the economy. We are not new to this. So it's something that we're watching very, very closely. And what I'd ask is that people just call balls and strikes on what's happening on the job loss, on the connection to tariffs. The economy is more important than any one political party. Jobs are more important than any one political party. And we should just call balls and strikes on what we are seeing. Secondly, on security issues, I want to talk about Secretary Robert Kennedy and how he's undermining vaccine standards and how that affects so many of us. RFK was an anti-vaxxer personally in his personal life, and then he became the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He has put out vaccine misinformation for a long time. This is particularly sensitive to our communities in Michigan who have autistic children. He has said very publicly the misinformation that vaccines cause autism, which has caused a lot of pain for people who have children who are autistic. This is why I voted against his confirmation when he came up. Now he has done the exact opposite of what he pledged to do when he was up here on the Hill. He's really been slashing and burning anyone who talks about the importance of vaccines at the Center for Disease Control. He fired every single member of a panel of outside experts that advises the CDC on vaccines. He's replaced them with vaccine skeptics. RFK fired the director of the Center for Disease Control. This is a person who had been nominated by Donald Trump. She had been confirmed just months earlier by my Republican colleagues here, but because she wouldn't just wholesale rubber stamp what he wanted on his campaign against vaccines, she was fired. And he canceled $500 million in research funding on new vaccines. Things like avian flu that we know in Michigan has certainly been an issue that's popped up over the last few years. How does this affect folks? I know that in a place like Michigan, there are certainly people who are skeptical about vaccines. But I think it's important to remember that it wasn't that long ago in the state of Michigan when we didn't have these vaccines that children were dying really terrible deaths. They were being maimed by really terrible diseases when we didn't have vaccines. This one was really personal for me. I remember my dad telling stories before we had the polio vaccine, when kids were getting paralyzed from the waist down, when they were getting this disease. He had to spend his summers out in Belle Isle, right, in the middle of the Detroit River, where there was fresh air, because there was this idea that if kids stayed in the city when it was hot, they didn't have any defense against polio, and there was a higher chance and risk that kids would get polio. So he was shipped out to Belle Isle to spend time there during the summers. That was in living memory. My dad's still with us and can tell us those stories. It's also about, vaccines are important also for the kids who can't get the vaccines, the vulnerable children who go to school with your children and who aren't able to get that vaccine and therefore are very vulnerable to things like measles. And we're already seeing the rates of measles in Michigan spike. We've had measles cases in 9 counties. We've had 24 children come down with measles after just 7 cases in all of 2024. That's a 400% increase in measles cases in Michigan. And measles is a terrible disease that's very painful for children and obviously their families watching them go through that. We're seeing examples of this in places like Texas. It's hard to know where to get good information, particularly since Robert Kennedy is affecting the CDC, who typically sends out these guidance. So my recommendation, and we'll put it in the comments here, is to go to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services page to get your information there. Don't take what is happening and being said across social media as a given. Do your own work for your own children and for the children of Michigan. Lastly, on democracy, I want to bring up an issue that's related to the Supreme Court, and that's the decision that they made in the last few weeks that you can consider issues of race and the language someone speaks in order to pull them over, profile them, and potentially even detain them. We know that this administration has been using pretty extraordinary measures to send fear through the community of immigrants here in the United States, people who are here illegally, who shouldn't be here, but also people who are here legally. And I've heard a ton of reports from Americans of Latino descent who are just carrying around their passport. They feel fear just being out and about every day as someone who speaks Spanish or is Latino in their appearance. So the Supreme Court allowed this. This means that someone can be pulled over because of race and language spoken if someone believes their suspicion that they're here illegally. We've had some pretty egregious cases, even in Michigan, of American citizens being wrongfully detained, pulled over, pushed to the ground, and taken in, only to realize that they are an American citizen who was raised here and released soon after. So to me, I'm watching that fear play out in places like West Michigan. I was in Grand Rapids and the west side of the state in August. People fear coming out to places where they know lots of other Latinos may be congregating. We're hearing about Mexican restaurants that are down in customers because people are scared to come out to the restaurant. People are carrying their passports, again, even American citizens. And to me, this is what just fundamentally chafes against anyone who cares about democracy. We shouldn't have certain segments of our population feeling fear by walking around every day. And the president is using a policy of division, of separating us, of dividing us as a tactic. It is, as a representative for the state of Michigan, it is painful to hear about people who are living in fear. We do some immigration casework in my office. You should reach out to our office, as many have already done, if you fear that something is being done illegally or improperly, or you just don't know how to respond. So please reach out to our office. We'll put the contact information in the comments.